Welcome, curious minds, to Beyond Midnight, where we delve into the shadows of history, not to chase ghosts, but to dissect the grim realities of the past. Tonight, we pose a question that has likely never kept you awake, yet upon closer inspection, might just send a shiver down your spine. Surviving a Roman invasion, could you do it? It's a thought experiment, of course. We are, thankfully, far removed from the clang of legionary shields and the dust of marching cohorts. Yet to truly understand history, to grasp the sheer, crushing weight of imperial expansion, one must attempt to place oneself within the boots, or perhaps the bare, muddy feet of those who faced it. Forget your modern comforts, your digital lifelines, your carefully curated existence. Imagine for a moment that you are not a viewer, but a denizen of an Iron Age settlement. Somewhere in the misty reaches of Britannia, or the dense forests of Germania, or the sun-baked plains of Gaul. Your world is one of wooden palisades, wattle and daub huts, the rhythmic thud of the loom, the lowing of cattle, the comforting scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Your days are dictated by the sun and the seasons, by the demands of the harvest, the hunt, the simple, brutal necessity of survival. Your gods are of the earth and sky, placated with offerings, feared for their caprice. Your disputes are settled by elders, your alliances forged in kinship and shared struggle. Life for you is hard, it is often short, but it is your life, governed by your customs, bounded by horizons you understand. You might have heard whispers, perhaps, carried on the wind from distant shores, tales of a formidable empire to the south, beyond the great sea, a people of stone cities, strange laws, and an insatiable appetite for conquest. But they are distant, abstract. Like a storm cloud on the far horizon, you acknowledge its presence, but you do not yet feel the first drops of rain. Then the rain begins. It starts subtly, a change in the air, a tension that ripples through the forests and fields. Scouts, if your tribe is wise enough to employ them, report unusual movements, not the usual raiding parties from rival tribes, but something far more organized, far more numerous. A disciplined advance, like a living, breathing machine. The sheer scale of it is incomprehensible. Weeks, perhaps months of preparation, logistical nightmares overcome with brutal efficiency. Thousands upon thousands of men, not just warriors, but engineers, surveyors, cooks, smiths, doctors, administrators, all moving with a singular, terrifying purpose. You might first see them not as a fighting force, but as a moving wall of earth and timber. The Romans, you see, did not merely conquer, they occupied. And occupation began with infrastructure. Roads, straight and true, cutting through ancient forests, flattening hills, bridging rivers. Forts, rising with astonishing speed, their ramparts of earth and timber providing an immediate, unyielding presence. Imagine the sound, the rhythmic thud of mallets driving stakes, the scrape of shovels, the shouts of centurions, the alien cadence of Latin. And the sight, the glint of polished bronze, the scarlet of tunics, the standards bearing the eagle, symbols of a power so immense it beggars belief. What is your first reaction? Panic, defiance, a desperate, futile hope that they will pass by like a particularly nasty storm. For most, it would likely be a cocktail of all three, seasoned with a profound, bone-deep terror. Your chieftain, perhaps a grizzled warrior who has led your people through countless skirmishes, now faces an enemy unlike any he has ever conceived. His war band, perhaps a few hundred strong, armed with spears, swords, and shields, relying on ferocity and knowledge of the local terrain, is utterly outmatched. The Romans operate on a different plane of warfare. They are professionals, drilled to perfection, equipped with superior arms and armor, masters of engineering and logistics. Their legions are not just collections of men, they are precision instruments of war. The battle, when it comes, is often swift and brutal. It is rarely a fair fight. The Roman legionary, protected by his larica segmentata or chainmail, his large scutum shield, and armed with the deadly gladius and pilum, is a walking tank. Your warriors, perhaps painted for battle, their courage undeniable, are met with an unyielding wall of steel. The pilum, a heavy javelin designed to pierce shields and armor, would rip through your ranks before they even closed. Then the relentless, disciplined advance, the short, stabbing thrusts of the gladius, the constant pressure, the sheer, overwhelming weight of numbers and training. The battle's standard, the eagle, never falters. The bugle calls are alien, yet terrifyingly effective signals. If you are a warrior, you likely fall. If you are lucky, you fall quickly. If you are not, you are captured, your fate uncertain. If you are a civilian, a farmer, a weaver, a child, you are caught in the swirling chaos. The smoke of burning huts, the screams of the wounded, the guttural shouts of the Roman soldiers. The world you knew, the only world you have ever known, is being ripped apart, piece by agonizing piece. Let's assume, for the sake of our morbid thought experiment, that you survive this initial onslaught. The dust settles, the fires smolder. The victorious legions are now the masters of your land. What happens next? This is where the true test of survival begins, for the initial shock gives way to the grinding reality of occupation. Your village, if it still stands, is no longer your own. Roman patrols, small groups of soldiers, perhaps a centurion and a handful of legionaries, become a constant, unwelcome presence. They speak in a language you don't understand. Their gestures are imperious. Their eyes, beneath the visors of their helmets, are cold and unreadable. You are no longer a free person. You are a conquered subject. The first practical challenge, food. The legions, being a massive fighting force, require immense logistical support. They will requisition your crops, your livestock. They will demand supplies. If you are a farmer, your fields, which once fed your family and your tribe, are now primarily feeding the conquerors. You will be left with barely enough to subsist. Resisting these demands is an act of suicide. Compliance is an act of slow starvation. You must make a choice. Do you hide your grain, your cattle? Risk discovery and brutal punishment, or do you hand it over, hoping to curry favor, to be seen as compliant, to survive another day? The brutal reality is that the Romans operated on a system of might makes right. They would take what they needed, and you would provide it, or suffer the consequences. Then comes the matter of labor. The Romans are builders. They will need roads, bridges, forts, eventually towns, and they will need hands to build them. Your hands, you, your family, your neighbors, will be conscripted, forced to labor under the watchful eyes of Roman overseers. This is not voluntary work. This is forced servitude. The hours are long, the work is backbreaking, the conditions are often harsh. Disease, injury, and exhaustion are constant companions. What do you do when a Roman soldier barks an order you don't comprehend, gesturing with his spear towards a pile of stones? You learn quickly. You learn to interpret gestures, to anticipate demands, to move with a speed and efficiency born of fear. Your social structure, the very fabric of your society, is now under immense pressure. Your chieftain, if he survived, might be taken away, perhaps executed, perhaps forced to swear allegiance to Rome, a puppet ruler stripped of true power. The elders who once held wisdom and authority are now diminished figures, their traditions mocked, their pronouncements ignored. New laws, Roman laws, are imposed. Laws you do not understand, enforced by men who do not understand your customs. Theft, once perhaps settled by restitution or tribal arbitration, is now a matter for Roman justice, which can be swift, brutal, and often arbitrary. Consider your family, your wife, your children. They are more vulnerable than ever. Roman soldiers, though disciplined, are still men, and conquest often brings with it the darkest aspects of human nature. Protecting your loved ones becomes an all-consuming obsession. Do you hide them? Do you try to make them invisible? Do you teach them to be silent, to avert their gaze, to never draw attention? The fear of the unknown, the fear of what a Roman patrol might do, becomes a constant, gnawing presence in your gut. And what of your identity, your language, your religion, your customs? The Romans, in their imperial hubris, often saw conquered peoples as barbarians, uncivilized, in need of Roman order and culture. They might not immediately ban your language, but Latin will become the language of power, of commerce, of administration. If you wish to interact with your new masters, to understand their demands, to potentially gain any advantage, you will need to learn at least a smattering of it. Your gods, the spirits of the forest and the river, are now overshadowed by Jupiter, Mars, and Minerva. Temples to Roman deities will rise, often on sacred sites, a physical manifestation of the new order. Do you cling fiercely to your ancestral beliefs, risking offense? Or do you adopt, at least outwardly, the Roman pantheon, hoping for some form of acceptance, some measure of peace? This is the insidious nature of Romanization, a slow, often voluntary erosion of identity. Now let's explore your options, your strategies for survival in this new, brutal world. Option 1: submission and collaboration. This is, for many, the path of least resistance, or at least the path of pragmatic survival. You accept the new order. You pay your taxes, you provide your labor, you offer no resistance. Perhaps you even try to learn Latin to understand Roman customs, to find a niche within the new system. You might become a translator, a guide, a local administrator, a tax collector for the Romans. This path offers a semblance of safety, perhaps even a degree of prosperity. You might get better rations, avoid the harshest labor, even gain some minor authority over your own people. But it comes at a cost. You are seen as a traitor by some of your own. You are an instrument of the conqueror. Every command you relay, every tax you collect, every act of compliance deepens the chasm between you and your past. Could you live with that? Could you look your starving neighbor in the eye, knowing you benefit from their subjugation? For many, the answer would be a resounding, if silent, yes. Survival, after all, is a powerful motivator. Option 2: passive resistance and enduring. This is the quiet rebellion, the silent defiance. You comply with the bare minimum. You pay your taxes, you perform your labor, but you do so with a sullen heart. You keep your traditions alive in secret, telling old stories by the firelight, whispering prayers to your ancient gods. You share what little food you have with your kin, you protect your family fiercely, you trust no Roman. You avoid eye contact, you speak only when spoken to, you make yourself as invisible as possible. This path is less dangerous than active rebellion, but it is a soul-crushing existence. It is a life lived in constant fear, under the shadow of an oppressive power. You are not free, and you know it. Every day is a test of endurance, a struggle to maintain a shred of dignity in a world that seeks to strip it away. Option 3: active resistance and rebellion. This is the path of the warrior, the rebel, the freedom fighter. This is the path of Boudica, of Vercingetorix, of Arminius. It is a path paved with blood and immense suffering, often ending in utter annihilation. To choose this path, you would need extraordinary courage, a deep-seated hatred for the conqueror, and a willingness to sacrifice everything. You would need to escape the immediate Roman presence, flee into the wilderness, the untamed forests, the remote hills. There you would gather like-minded individuals, survivors, warriors, those who refuse to bend the knee. You would live a harsh, nomadic existence, constantly on the move, constantly hiding. Your food would come from hunting, foraging, or raiding Roman supply convoys, a dangerous proposition. Your weapons would be what you could forge, what you could scavenge, what you could capture. Your tactics would be guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run attacks, ambushes, sabotage. You would target isolated patrols, supply lines, small forts. You would never engage a full legion head-on, that would be suicidal. Your hope would be to bleed the Romans, to make their occupation too costly, too troublesome. But the Romans are masters of counterinsurgency. They would send punitive expeditions, burn villages, slaughter populations, hunt you down relentlessly. They would offer rewards for your capture, turn neighbor against neighbor. The life of a rebel is one of constant vigilance, of hunger, of cold, of loss. Your comrades would fall one by one. Your family, if they remained in the conquered territory, would be at immense risk. The chances of success are infinitesimally small. The chances of a brutal death are overwhelmingly high. But for some, this is the only path that offers true freedom, even if it is freedom in death. Let's delve deeper into the practicalities of these choices and the myriad smaller decisions that would define your daily struggle. Consider your dwelling. Your wattle and daub hut, once a sanctuary, is now vulnerable. The Romans might burn it, requisition it, or simply impose taxes on it. If you are forced to relocate, where do you go? The land is now crisscrossed with Roman roads patrolled by Roman soldiers. Every natural feature, every river, every hill, every forest might conceal a Roman presence. Do you attempt to rebuild in secret, perhaps deeper in the woods? Or do you accept the Roman-designated settlement, often near a fort or a new Roman town, where you can be more easily controlled and taxed? The latter offers security from the wilderness, but at the cost of autonomy. Water, a fundamental need. Your traditional well, your stream, might now be under Roman control or contaminated by the detritus of their occupation. You would need to find new sources, perhaps traveling further, risking encounters with patrols. Hygiene, a concept often rudimentary in the Iron Age, would become even more challenging. Disease, always a threat, would be amplified by the presence of a large, mobile population like the Roman army, bringing with them new pathogens. Camps and temporary settlements are breeding grounds for illness. Dysentery, fever, infections from wounds, these would be as deadly as any Roman sword. What about trade? Your traditional networks, based on barter and tribal alliances, would be disrupted. The Romans would introduce their own currency, their own trade routes, their own goods. If you produce something valuable, perhaps iron ore or fine pottery or wool, the Romans would demand it, likely at prices favorable to them or as a form of tribute. Could you adapt? Could you learn to trade in Roman denarii, to understand their markets, to sell your wares to them? Or would you be relegated to a subsistence economy, producing only for your immediate needs? The introduction of Roman goods, from fine pottery to tools, might seem appealing, but they represent a deeper economic subjugation, making you reliant on the very system that conquered you. And your skills, if you are a skilled craftsman, a smith, a potter, a carpenter, you might find your abilities in demand by the Romans. They always needed skilled labor. This could be a pathway to survival, perhaps even a degree of comfort, but it means working for the conqueror, forging their weapons, building their structures, contributing to the very apparatus of your subjugation. Your traditional art forms might be discarded or adapted to Roman tastes. The very essence of your craft, once tied to your culture and identity, would be twisted to serve a foreign master. Consider the psychological toll, the constant stress, the fear, the loss of autonomy, the erosion of identity. The Romans were masters of psychological warfare, even if they didn't call it that. The sheer spectacle of their power, the disciplined ranks, the impressive engineering, the unyielding legal system, it was all designed to instill awe and fear, to break the spirit of resistance. You would witness atrocities, summary executions, the casual cruelty of conquerors. You would see your friends, your family, suffer. How do you maintain your sanity? How do you keep hope alive in a world that offers so little of it? Perhaps you retreat into your inner world, finding solace in memory, in quiet defiance, in the bonds of family that somehow endure. The long-term impact is perhaps the most insidious, the slow, inexorable process of Romanization. It's not always forced. Sometimes it's a gradual adoption, a pragmatic choice. Roman towns offer amenities, baths, theaters, markets, a sense of order and security. Roman law, while harsh, can also bring a degree of stability, reducing intertribal warfare. Roman roads facilitate travel and trade. For some, especially the younger generation, Roman culture might even seem appealing, a pathway to advancement, to a broader world. They might learn Latin, wear Roman clothes, adopt Roman names, even serve in the Roman army, fighting for the very empire that conquered their grandparents. Imagine you are a young man, born perhaps a decade after the initial invasion. You have no memory of the old ways, only the Roman presence. Your father speaks of ancient glories of a time before the eagles, but it sounds like a myth. You see Roman soldiers, Roman merchants, Roman officials. You see the benefits of their infrastructure, their order. You might even see opportunity. Do you cling to the fading embers of your ancestral culture, or do you embrace the new, powerful reality? This is the agonizing choice faced by generations under occupation. The loss of language, the fading of traditions, the gradual assimilation, it is a form of cultural death, often more complete than any military defeat. Let's consider specific scenarios. The woman's perspective. If you are a woman, your vulnerability is amplified. Beyond the general dangers of war and occupation, you face additional threats. The Roman army, like any army, could be brutal. Sexual violence was a grim reality of conquest. Your role in society might shift dramatically. If men are conscripted for labor or killed in battle, women might be forced to take on traditionally male roles, managing farms, hunting, or seeking new ways to provide for their families. Your traditional crafts, weaving, pottery, might find new markets or become obsolete. The very concept of family structure and lineage, central to many Iron Age societies, could be irrevocably altered by intermarriage with Romans or the consequences of violence. Your survival would hinge on a combination of resilience, resourcefulness, and perhaps a desperate plea for protection from whatever male relatives remained, or even from a sympathetic Roman. The child's perspective. A child's experience would be one of profound trauma and adaptation, witnessing violence, displacement, hunger, losing parents, siblings, their entire world. Their survival would depend entirely on the adults around them. But children are also adaptable. They might learn Latin faster, absorb Roman customs more readily. They might grow up to be the bridge between two worlds or simply the product of the new one. Their games would change, their stories would be different. They might play at being Roman soldiers or build miniature Roman forts. This generation, the first to know only Roman rule, would be the most susceptible to full Romanization, or the most likely to harbor a quiet, simmering resentment. The landscape itself. The land changes. Forests are cleared for timber for forts and roads. Mines are exploited for valuable minerals. Rivers are bridged, marshes drained. The very face of your ancestral home is reshaped, scarred by the demands of empire. Your sacred groves might be cut down, your ancient burial mounds disturbed. The land, which was once your provider, your protector, your spiritual anchor, becomes a resource to be exploited by a foreign power. You might find yourself alienated from the very earth beneath your feet. What if you tried to escape, to simply vanish into the wilderness beyond the reach of Roman power? Where would you go? The known world for many was limited. Beyond your tribal lands lay the territories of other tribes potentially hostile or already conquered themselves. The Roman Empire was vast, its reach extending across continents. To truly escape, you would need to travel immense distances through unknown lands, without resources, without maps, without protection. You would face hunger, exposure, wild animals, and the very real risk of encountering other desperate refugees, or even Roman patrols on the fringes of their control. This path is one of immense hardship, of constant flight, and a gamble against overwhelming odds. But for some, the wilderness, however harsh, offered a greater promise of freedom than submission. Let's consider the long game. The Romans, unlike many conquerors, were not merely raiders. They were colonizers. They established towns, brought in Roman settlers, built infrastructure designed to last for centuries. Their goal was not just to defeat, but to integrate, to turn conquered territories into Roman provinces, their inhabitants into Roman citizens. This process could take generations. Your grandchildren or great-grandchildren might speak fluent Latin, worship Roman gods, live in stone houses, and consider themselves Roman. They might even join the legions and fight against other barbarians. But even then, the old ways might persist, like stubborn roots beneath concrete. Local languages might be spoken in the privacy of homes. Ancient customs might be practiced in secret. The memory of a time before Rome, however faint, might be passed down through whispered stories. The tension between the Romanized elite and the stubbornly traditional rural population would be a constant undercurrent, occasionally flaring into open resentment or rebellion. So could you do it? Could you survive a Roman invasion? It's not a question of physical prowess alone, though that would certainly help. It's a question of adaptability, of resilience, of moral compromise, of sheer, bloody-minded determination. Would you fight and die gloriously or ignominiously? Would you submit and live a shadow of your former self? Would you flee, risking all for a fleeting glimpse of freedom? Would you collaborate, becoming part of the machinery of oppression for the sake of your family's survival? There is no single right answer, no easy path. Every choice carries immense risk, immense cost. The Roman invasion was not a singular event, but a protracted process of conquest, occupation, and transformation. It stripped away identity, reshaped landscapes, imposed new laws, new economies, new ways of life. It was a brutal, relentless demonstration of imperial power. And those who survived it did so not through heroism alone, but often through a complex, agonizing series of compromises and adaptations. The ability to endure, to bend without breaking, to find a sliver of hope in the darkest of times, these were the true markers of survival. The Roman Empire, with its legions and its laws, its roads and its rhetoric, was a force that reshaped the known world. It left an indelible mark on the cultures it touched, a legacy of both destruction and development. And for the inhabitants of those lands, it was a test of survival unlike any other. A test that few passed without fundamental changes to who they were and who their descendants would become. A test that even today makes us wonder. The very concept of survival in the shadow of the Roman war machine extended far beyond the initial clash of arms. It evolved into a grinding, ceaseless test of adaptability, a slow erosion of identity, and a profound redefinition of what it meant to exist. We left off contemplating the immediate aftermath, the requisitioning of food, the forced labor, the imposition of new laws and social structures. But the Roman grip, once established, tightened in ways both overt and insidious, reshaping the very fabric of life for generations. Consider the economy. Your tribal society before the eagles likely operated on a system of subsistence agriculture, localized trade, and perhaps a degree of communal ownership or shared resources. The Romans, however, brought with them a sophisticated, centralized economic system. Taxation was paramount. You would now be subject to the tributum soli, a land tax, and the tributum capitis, a poll tax levied on individuals. Imagine the Roman census takers, precise and unyielding, arriving in your village. Every field, every person, every head of livestock would be counted, assessed, and recorded. There would be no negotiation, no appeal to ancient custom. Failure to pay meant confiscation of property or worse, enslavement. This was not merely about revenue, it was about control, about making every individual directly accountable to the Roman state. The introduction of coinage would further disrupt your familiar world. Barter, the exchange of goods and services, would diminish. You would need Roman denarii or sestertii to pay your taxes, to purchase goods from Roman merchants, or to participate in the burgeoning Roman markets. How would you earn this coin? Perhaps by selling your surplus crops to Roman garrisons, or by working for Roman contractors, building roads or public works. This transition from a localized, self-sufficient economy to one integrated into a vast imperial network would be disorienting. Your labor, your produce, your very time would now be quantified in a way utterly alien to your ancestors. It was a subtle yet powerful mechanism of control, binding you ever tighter to the Roman system. And then there was the phenomenon of urbanization. The Romans, wherever they went, built cities. Not just temporary forts, but permanent settlements, coloniae for veterans, municipia for local elites, and civitates which served as administrative centers for the surrounding tribal territories. These cities were beacons of Roman power and culture. They boasted forums, temples, basilicas, baths, theaters, and amphitheaters. They were centers of commerce, law, and administration. For the rural population, the pull of these new urban centers would be undeniable. They offered opportunities, work, trade, access to Roman goods, perhaps even a chance to escape the drudgery of farm life. But moving to a Roman town meant leaving behind the familiar, the ancestral lands, the close-knit community of your village. It meant adopting a new way of life, living in stone houses, navigating crowded streets, interacting with Romans and Romanized natives. It meant a deeper immersion into Roman culture, a faster pace of assimilation. Could you resist the lure of the city, with its promise of a slightly easier, more comfortable existence, even if it meant abandoning your heritage? Or would you remain in the countryside, clinging to the old ways but facing harsher conditions and greater isolation? The legal system, as mentioned, was another cornerstone of Roman rule. Your tribal laws based on custom, oral tradition, and the authority of elders would be superseded by Roman civil law. This was a complex written system, often administered by Roman magistrates who spoke no local language and understood little of your customs. Disputes over land, property, debt, or personal injury, once settled within the community, would now be brought before a Roman court. Justice for the conquered could be arbitrary, slow, or brutally swift. A Roman citizen, even a low-ranking one, often held more legal standing than a native non-citizen. Understanding the intricacies of Roman law or finding someone who could interpret it for you became essential for navigating this new reality. Imagine trying to defend yourself against an accusation in a foreign tongue before a foreign judge with your fate hanging in the balance. The sheer powerlessness would be overwhelming. Perhaps one of the most profound and lasting impacts was on religion and culture. The Romans generally were pragmatic about foreign gods. They often incorporated local deities into their pantheon or found parallels between them. Your gods might be given Latin names and Roman attributes, their shrines rebuilt in Roman style. But the imperial cult, the worship of the emperor as a divine figure, would be introduced. This was not optional, it was a civic duty, a demonstration of loyalty to the state. Public sacrifices, festivals, and oaths sworn by the emperor's genius would become part of the new public life. Could you participate in these rituals, knowing that they were an affront to your ancestral spirits? Or would you feign compliance, performing the motions while secretly clinging to your true beliefs, risking discovery and punishment for sedition? This religious syncretism, this blending of old and new, was a powerful tool of Romanization. It allowed for a gradual, less confrontational absorption of local populations, but it was also a subtle form of erasure. Over generations, the distinctiveness of your original faith could fade, replaced by a diluted, Romanized version. Your children might grow up knowing only the Romanized deities, their original names and stories lost to time. And what of your language? Latin, the language of administration, law, and the military, would become the language of power. If you wish to interact with the authorities, to trade in the markets, to gain any advantage, learning Latin would be a necessity. Your children, if they attended Roman schools, yes, schools, another tool of Romanization, would be taught Latin, Roman history, Roman rhetoric. The old tongue, your mother tongue, would gradually retreat to the home, to the countryside, to the realm of oral tradition. Over centuries, it might wither, leaving only echoes in place names and a few stubborn pockets of resistance. Imagine the generational divide. Grandparents who spoke only the old tongue, parents who spoke both, and grandchildren who spoke primarily Latin, perhaps struggling to understand the ancient stories told by their elders. This linguistic shift was a quiet, yet devastating, form of cultural conquest. Let's consider the ultimate form of assimilation, or perhaps opportunity, military service. The Roman army, after securing a province, would often recruit local men into its auxiliary units. These were non-citizen units, but they offered pay, training, and the promise of Roman citizenship upon honorable discharge after 25 years of service. For a young man in a conquered land, with limited prospects, this could be a powerful incentive. It offered a path out of poverty, a chance for upward mobility, a sense of belonging, albeit to the very empire that subjugated his people. Could you or your son join the Roman army, don the uniform, learn the drills, swear allegiance to the eagle, fight for Rome, perhaps against other barbarians, perhaps even against your own people if they rose in rebellion? This was the ultimate moral quandary, to fight for the conqueror, to become an instrument of their power, in exchange for personal gain and the distant promise of citizenship. Many did. They returned as veterans, sometimes with Roman wives, Roman names, and a deeply ingrained Roman identity. They were heroes to some, traitors to others, living embodiments of the complex and often tragic process of Romanization. Their presence, their stories, their Roman ways would further accelerate the integration of their communities into the empire. Beyond these grand, systemic changes, survival was also about the myriad small, daily acts of defiance or compliance. It was about the way you looked at a Roman soldier, the tone of your voice when you answered their questions. It was about how you raised your children. Did you teach them the old songs in secret, or did you encourage them to embrace the new ways for their own safety? Cultural resistance, subtle and often overlooked, was a common thread. It wasn't always about picking up a sword. It was about keeping the old stories alive around the hearth, even as Roman tales of gods and heroes filled the public spaces. It was about maintaining local craft traditions, even as Roman pottery and metalwork flooded the markets. It was about the quiet, unyielding practice of ancestral rituals in hidden glades or beneath the cloak of night. It was about the shared glance among your kin when a Roman official passed by, a silent acknowledgement of shared resentment. These small acts, though seemingly insignificant, were vital for maintaining a sense of identity, a connection to a past that Rome sought to erase. Economic evasion was another form of quiet resistance, hiding surplus grain, smuggling goods past Roman tax collectors, operating in black markets. These acts were dangerous, but necessary for those who refused to be completely subsumed by the Roman economic machine. It was a constant game of cat and mouse, a struggle to retain a shred of economic autonomy in a system designed to extract maximum resources. Social resistance manifested in various ways, ostracizing collaborators, even subtly, strengthening kinship networks to provide mutual support against Roman demands, maintaining a sense of community that excluded the conqueror, even if forced to interact with them daily. Rumors, whispers, and folk tales could become vehicles for resistance, mocking Roman authority or celebrating past rebellions. It was a silent war of attrition, fought in the hearts and minds of the conquered. The psychological toll, however, was perhaps the most pervasive and insidious. Living under constant surveillance, the fear of arbitrary violence, the humiliation of subjugation, the loss of dignity. The Roman presence was not just physical, it was psychological. The very air you breathed seemed to carry the weight of their dominance. Depression, apathy, and a pervasive sense of hopelessness would be constant threats. How would you cope? Some might turn to drink, others to fatalism. Some might find solace in community, in shared suffering. Others might simply shut down, their spirits broken. The concept of Pax Romana, the Roman peace, was often a peace enforced by the sword, a peace of submission. For the conquered, it was a peace that came at an immense cost to their autonomy and their spirit. Imagine the daily anxieties. A Roman patrol approaches your farm. Do you continue your work, feigning indifference? Or do you drop your tools, bow your head, and wait for their demands? A Roman official requests a quota of grain that you know will leave your family starving. Do you protest, risking a lashing or worse? Or do you comply, watching your children slowly weaken from hunger? Your daughter catches the eye of a Roman soldier. Do you pull her away, risking offense? Or do you watch helplessly, praying for her safety? These are not abstract questions. These were the brutal, agonizing choices that defined daily existence under Roman rule. The process of Romanization was not uniform. It varied by region, by tribe, by individual. Some areas, like Gaul, became heavily Romanized, their languages evolving into Romance tongues, their cities thriving Roman centers. Others, like parts of Britannia or Germania, resisted more fiercely, or were simply too remote for the Romanization process to fully take hold. The degree to which you, as an individual, would be Romanized would depend on your location. your social status, your personal choices, and sheer luck. If you lived near a major Roman road or a large military camp, the pressure to conform would be immense. If you lived in a remote valley, far from any Roman settlement, you might retain more of your traditional ways, but also face greater isolation and less access to Roman benefits. The Roman Empire, for all its power, was not monolithic in its application of control. There were always fringes, pockets of resistance, areas where the old ways stubbornly persisted. And what happens when the Roman grip begins to loosen? The Roman Empire, for all its apparent permanence, was not eternal. Centuries later, internal strife, economic decline, and external pressures from other barbarian groups would lead to its eventual decline and withdrawal from many provinces. What then? Would the Romanized natives revert to their ancestral ways? Would they cling to the vestiges of Roman culture? Or would they forge something entirely new, a hybrid identity born of both conquest and adaptation? The legacy of Rome for the conquered is complex and often contradictory. It brought roads, laws, administrative structures, and a degree of peace, albeit imposed. It introduced new technologies, agricultural practices, and architectural styles. But it also brought violence, exploitation, cultural suppression, and the loss of sovereignty. For generations, your ancestors would have grappled with this duality, struggling to reconcile the benefits of Roman order with the crushing weight of Roman oppression. The question, could you do it, transcends mere physical survival. It delves into the deeper, more unsettling realm of identity, culture, and the human spirit under extreme duress. Would you retain your sense of self, your connection to your ancestors, in the face of such overwhelming pressure? Or would you slowly but inexorably become a Roman, a product of the very empire that conquered you? The answer, for most, was a complex, nuanced blend of both. A survival that meant adapting, compromising, and often losing a part of what they once were. The story of survival under the Eagles is not a simple tale of heroes and villains, but a sprawling, nuanced saga of human resilience, compromise, and the slow, grinding machinery of empire. We've explored the initial shock, the brutal military superiority, and the immediate, practical challenges of occupation. But the Roman presence was not merely a temporary imposition. It was a deep, systemic transformation, designed to endure, to integrate, to make the conquered an integral, if subordinate, part of the vast Roman world. Let us now delve further into the intricacies of this transformation and the relentless pressure it exerted on the individual attempting to survive. The Roman administrative structure, for instance, was a marvel of organization, a bureaucratic leviathan that extended its tentacles into every corner of the empire. Beyond the legions, there were the governors, legati Augusti or proconsuls, appointed by the emperor or the senate, who held supreme civil and military authority within a province. Beneath them were a host of officials, procurators managing financial affairs, tax collectors, census takers, and a myriad of clerks and scribes. Imagine this new hierarchy descending upon your land. Your tribal elders, your chieftains, who once held sway through tradition and personal charisma, were now either co-opted into this foreign administration as puppet rulers, or simply bypassed and rendered irrelevant. Decisions that once rested on local custom or communal consensus were now dictated by decrees issued from a distant provincial capital, written in Latin, and enforced by men who were utterly detached from your way of life. Every aspect of your existence, from the amount of grain you harvested to the resolution of a family dispute, could potentially fall under the purview of this alien bureaucracy. Navigating this labyrinth of foreign laws and officials would be a constant source of anxiety, requiring a new kind of cunning, a new form of survival skill, the ability to understand, or at least appear to understand, the demands of the state. The very landscape, as we touched upon, was not just marked by roads and forts, but fundamentally reshaped by Roman engineering. Aqueducts, those magnificent arch structures, would bring fresh water to Roman cities and military installations, often diverting precious resources from local streams and wells. Public baths, not merely places of hygiene but social hubs, would rise, their steam and chatter a stark contrast to the quiet, smoky huts of your village. Temples, not just small shrines but imposing stone edifices, dedicated to Jupiter Optimus Maximus or the imperial cult, would dominate the skyline, proclaiming the supremacy of Roman gods and Roman power. These structures were not just functional, they were symbols, physical manifestations of a new dominant civilization. You would walk past them daily, their sheer scale and permanence a constant reminder of who was truly in charge. How would you react? With awe, resentment, or a grudging acceptance of their utility? Public health, a concept often rudimentary in your Iron Age world, would also be profoundly affected. While Roman cities often had sewers and public sanitation, their military camps and early settlements could be breeding grounds for disease. Large concentrations of people, poor hygiene among soldiers on campaign, and the introduction of new diseases from across the empire would lead to outbreaks of plague, dysentery, and other illnesses that could decimate local populations. Your traditional healers, relying on herbs and ancient remedies, would be ill-equipped to combat these new scourges. The Roman military doctors, while more advanced, would primarily serve their own legions. For the conquered, survival often meant enduring epidemics, watching loved ones succumb to unseen enemies brought by the very presence of the conquerors. Education, a powerful tool of Romanization, would also play a role. While formal schools were initially for the Roman elite and the children of collaborators, their influence would spread. Young, ambitious natives might be sent to these schools, learning Latin, Roman history, rhetoric, and philosophy. They would emerge as Romanized intellectuals, administrators, and sometimes even citizens, serving as a bridge between the conquerors and the conquered. But this came at a price, a detachment from their ancestral culture, a re-education that often presented their own people as barbarians and Rome as the bringer of civilization. If you were a parent, would you send your child to such a school, knowing it might secure their future but alienate them from their past? Or would you keep them close, preserving tradition, but condemning them to a life of limited opportunity under the new regime? Food and diet, seemingly simple aspects of daily life, would also undergo significant changes. Roman agricultural techniques, such as the use of the plow, crop rotation, and new irrigation methods, might be introduced, potentially increasing yields but also altering traditional land use. New crops like grapes for wine or olives for oil might be cultivated, not for local consumption but for Roman markets. Your diet, once based on local grains, root vegetables, and whatever meat you could hunt or raise, might shift as Roman staples became more available, or as Roman demands altered what you were allowed to grow. The very act of eating, once a communal, ritualistic experience tied to the land, could become a stark reminder of economic dependency. And leisure, entertainment, the Romans brought their own forms of spectacle. Gladiatorial contests, chariot races, theatrical performances, these were central to Roman urban life. While initially confined to Roman settlements, their influence would gradually seep into the conquered territories. Amphitheaters would rise, their brutal spectacles drawing crowds, including curious or compelled natives. Could you sit and watch men kill each other for entertainment, a practice utterly alien to many tribal societies? Would you find it thrilling, horrifying, or merely another bizarre manifestation of your new master's power? These spectacles, designed to awe and entertain, were also powerful tools of cultural indoctrination, normalizing Roman values and demonstrating Roman might. The concept of citizenship was the ultimate carrot Rome offered. Initially a privilege reserved for Romans, it could be extended to conquered peoples, often as a reward for loyalty, military service as auxiliaries, or for adopting Roman ways. What did it mean to be a Roman citizen? It meant legal rights, protection under Roman law, the right to vote, though often symbolic in the empire, and a certain social standing. For a native, achieving citizenship was the pinnacle of assimilation, a complete transformation of identity. It meant that your children, born citizens, would have opportunities unimaginable to your ancestors. But it also meant abandoning your old identity, embracing a new name, a new language, a new allegiance. Would you strive for it, for yourself or your descendants, knowing the profound cost to your heritage? Or would you reject it, clinging to the fading dream of your ancestral freedom? The settling of Roman veterans, coloniae, further solidified Roman presence. These were often strategically located towns, populated by retired legionaries who were granted land in conquered territories. They were Roman citizens, loyal to Rome, and served as a permanent civilian bulwark of imperial power. Imagine your village, once surrounded by familiar fields, now having a Roman colonia spring up nearby, its inhabitants speaking Latin, practicing Roman customs, and serving as a constant reminder of the new order. These veteran settlements were not just military outposts, they were cultural beachheads, steadily expanding the zone of Roman influence. Rebellions, despite the overwhelming odds, were a recurring feature of Roman occupation. From the fierce resistance of the Cantabri in Hispania to the Germanic tribes under Arminius, from the Iceni of Boudica in Britannia to the Jewish revolts in Judea, the spirit of defiance rarely died out completely. These were often desperate, bloody affairs, born of unbearable oppression, cultural insult, or charismatic leadership. If you chose the path of active resistance, as we discussed, you would be part of this cycle. You would witness the initial, exhilarating victories, often achieved through ambush and cunning, followed by the inevitable, brutal Roman response. Legions would be recalled, entire regions would be devastated, and the rebellion would be crushed with overwhelming force. Leaders would be executed, populations enslaved, and the remaining rebels hunted down relentlessly. The psychological impact of these failed rebellions would be profound. It would instill a deep sense of hopelessness, a chilling understanding of Rome's unyielding power. For those who survived the suppression, the choice between further resistance and utter submission would become even starker. Yet, even in defeat, the memory of rebellion could serve as a powerful undercurrent, a whispered legend of a time when your people fought for their freedom, a seed of future defiance. The cycles of rebellion and suppression were not just military events. They were profound psychological traumas that shaped the collective memory of the conquered. Now let us consider the long, slow decline of Roman power, a process that unfolded over centuries. The initial, overwhelming military might of Rome would eventually begin to wane. Economic crises, internal political instability, and increasing pressure from other barbarian groups on the empire's borders would lead to a gradual weakening of central authority. For those living in the provinces, this decline would manifest in various ways. A reduction in military garrisons, less frequent patrols, a decay of infrastructure as maintenance faltered, and an increase in brigandage or local conflicts as Rome's grip loosened. This new phase of survival would present a different set of challenges. The old, oppressive master was weakening, but a power vacuum could be just as dangerous as an iron fist. Would local strongmen emerge, vying for power? Would rival tribes, long suppressed by Rome, reassert themselves, leading to new conflicts? Would the Romanized elite, accustomed to Roman order, be able to maintain stability, or would they be swept away by resurgent native traditions? In some areas, the Roman presence would simply fade, legions withdrawn to defend the heartland, leaving behind a hybrid culture, a mix of Roman institutions, local traditions, and new influences from migrating peoples. In others, particularly the frontier zones, the withdrawal could be abrupt and chaotic, leaving a power vacuum and a return to more localized, often violent, forms of governance. Your descendants, centuries after the initial invasion, might find themselves in a world that was neither fully Roman nor fully traditional, but a complex tapestry woven from the threads of conquest and adaptation. The roads, once symbols of Roman power, might fall into disrepair, becoming overgrown paths. The grand cities, once bustling centers of commerce, might shrink, their magnificent buildings slowly crumbling into ruins. The Latin language, once the lingua franca of power, might evolve into new, distinct languages or retreat into the realm of scholars and the church. Yet the legacy of Rome would endure. In the foundations of towns, in the names of places, in legal concepts, in religious practices, and in the very genetic makeup of the population. So when we ask, could you survive a Roman invasion, we are not asking about a single moment of battle, but about centuries of profound, often agonizing, transformation. It is a question that probes the depths of human resilience, the compromises required for existence, and the enduring power of culture and identity in the face of overwhelming force. It forces us to confront the reality that survival is rarely clean or heroic. It is often messy, morally ambiguous, and profoundly shapes who you become. The true test of survival was not just to live through the initial conquest, but to navigate the long, complex aftermath, to find a way to exist, to preserve something of yourself, even as the world around you was irrevocably changed. It was a journey of adaptation, resistance, and assimilation, a testament to the enduring, often tragic, capacity of humanity to persist against impossible odds. It was a journey of adaptation, resistance, and assimilation, a testament to the enduring, often tragic, capacity of humanity to persist against impossible odds. The question then of surviving a Roman invasion, could you do it, is not easily answered, for it is not a singular event, but a lifelong, generational ordeal. It demands not just strength of arms, but strength of spirit, a capacity for compromise, and a willingness to witness the slow, inexorable reshaping of everything you hold dear. It is a testament to the fact that history is not merely a collection of dates and battles, but the sum of countless individual struggles, fears, and desperate hopes. And in understanding those struggles, we begin to truly grasp the profound and often brutal reality of empire. This has been Beyond Midnight. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the shadows of the past.